Joshua Steger here from etfadvisor.com.au, and today I'll give you our weekly update on what we're seeing in the ETF space, and this is what we've covered off in the email to subscribers that went out last night. So today I'll cover Ethereum and Bitcoin, I'll also cover India, I'll cover Uranium, and I'll also cover a space that looks to be bottoming after a long downtrend, and it can be accessed with an ETF. So we'll review that quite closely as well. Let's get started. So as promised, we'll deal with some of the things we've covered in our weekly email that we sent out to subscribers last night. So as you can see, it's pretty comprehensive. We cover everything that's moved and hasn't moved in the Aussie ETF market, and you can see, with a really key view to look at those thematic and sector ETFs. So they're the ones that I think Australians are really missing out on and can certainly add a lot of value to your portfolio. So we'll start here today with Ethereum and Bitcoin as well, but we'll cover off on Ethereum first. So you can see here we've got the daily chart. We talked about this last week because we were looking for that to move out of this kind of range. Now it seemed to pull out, and then with Bitcoin also pull back into the kind of breakout zone. So you're pretty much going to be below here. It needs a lot more time, but above here, a trend could start. So we'll just look at, you've got to also remember that Ethereum's had a really good big run, so that's 52%, so it can take some time to digest. On the weekly chart, it's not as good. It's really quite junky, but if Bitcoin's strong, crypto's strong, the market's pretty strong, Ethereum could certainly get moving. So we'll have a quick look at Bitcoin as well. So Bitcoin, as I said, this is definitely the leader in the crypto space. You can see it did get out into new all-time highs up here, but it did pull back. So you got four down days there, pretty big volume. Obviously this is the weekend, so it does trade 7 days a week, Bitcoin, but so it's pulled back into that kind of breakout zone. So as I said, below there, it's going to need more time. We certainly thought it was going to go, but it's kind of just in between those 2 points and kind of reflects what's happening in the broader market. If it's a risk-off environment, I don't think Bitcoin is going to push out. Although if the market can continue to run, Bitcoin, could well push with the market as well. So you've got to remember, once again, this has had a pretty big move from the lows as well. So there's 50%. But it was, we identified that because it was a really nice base, a really quite constructive, and that's why we wanted to look at it. But as I said, we've just got to be a bit cautious here. It might need a bit more time, but certainly one to watch this week. And going forward with gold having run really strongly, there's a move away from pure currencies, or certainly currencies that continue to be printed and get diluted. So that's probably the benefit of Bitcoin, is that it's got just those 21 million coins that are ever going to be created. So there is a bit of a hedge there to the inflation of money printing. So it's certainly something to keep an eye on, and we'll watch that very closely this week. And still, as I said, this is a really handy base into new all-time highs. I think, if it doesn't go here, it's probably just going to take a bit more time, and it'll go a bit later in the year. So certainly one to keep on the watch list. So the second thing we wanted to cover today was India, and this is the Nifty 50 index, so the top 50 Indian stocks reflected in an index. So one to watch for just a feel of what's going on in the Indian market. So this has been on our watch list for a few weeks now because of this really nice structured base. It's tightened up really nicely on the right hand side. There is a bit of selling there with those red bars, but it's not really affecting the price, so it's kind of holding within there. This is the range that we want to watch. Pushing out of here, the trend can start. If it can't get through that yet, it might just need a bit more time. But India is probably the key growth market globally at the moment, with GDP growth in excess of 6% a year over the next few years. So certainly firing, and that's kind of where you want to be as an investor. You want to be in a market that's growing strongly, and India is that global market at the moment. So let's just have a look at how we can access that in Australia. So there's 4 different ETFs that we've covered off in a separate video, which we did and you can see that on YouTube. And you should take a look, because I delve quite deeply into the individual holdings of each of these ETFs. So you've got NDIA, IIND, GRIN, and FIIN. And when I want to get access to a market or theme, so I like India, or if I like India, I want to be looking at that ETF that's breaking out first. So breaking into those new high zone first. So you can kind of see that's where those points are. But then we've got GRIN here, and it has actually broken out and had a new all-time high close on Friday on the Aussie market. So that's something definitely worth keeping an eye on. I might actually delve into some of those holdings in GRIN, because I think that's going to tell us a bit more of a story about what's going on here in terms of why that moved into new all-time highs. So once again, these are the top 10 holdings that I preloaded and did for the previous video. But you can see, it has quite a different set of holdings compared to the other ETFs, NDIA, IIND, and FII. And so here you can see, so that's our second biggest holding, pushing into new highs this week, pushing into new highs, looking quite constructive. That looks quite constructive. That also very constructive. So you can kind of see, you get a feel close to new all-time highs. Bharat Electronics all-time highs. This one has more work to do. So Motilal as well. Jupiter Wagons, more work to do. Banks have been very strong. So there's a new, this will be a new 52 or new year-to-date high, but not a new all-time high. So you can kind of see, you get a feel that GRIN. So let's just pull up the GRIN chart, and this has been the most recently listed Indian ETF, but it seems to be more growth orientated, whereas the other the other Aussie ETFs for India seem to have a lot more banks. So this one, as I said, that's really constructive and pushed out new all-time close, high close, and pretty good green bars, so a bit of buying coming in. So that's certainly the one to keep a close eye on. And then we'll also be looking to see if the next ETF, which is kind of closest to breaking out as well, can get going, and that's IIND. So if you have a look there, really constructive base, just like the Indian market. There's kind of your junky moves, and it's kind of started to tighten up here, but once again needs something to push it out. But it's right on that edge. So certainly India, a key idea for us. So definitely worth watching, putting on your watch list. And as I said, key growth market globally. If it looks like it's going to break out and start trending, I mean, why wouldn't you want to be there as an investor? Third item on our agenda today was uranium and atom. So just looking at the weekly, so this is one of the screens I run weekly, and just looking at the top performing ETF in Australia over the last week, and we've got atom, uranium. So uranium, you can kind of see, so this is the sparkline graph, always worth looking at, but you can kind of see that's the chart over 1 year, but it's finally popped into, it's just green on the top there, so it's showing finally it's moved into positive territory for the year performance. But I mean, in terms of, look at these numbers, 5% for the week, 27% over 1 month, year to date, respectful now at 15%. Obviously it's run straight up from the bottom, but certainly piques the interest, something to keep an eye on. So we'll have a look at the chart, and this is Global X Atom ETF, ATOM, and covers uranium. So we'll have a look at their holdings in a minute, but you can kind of see, I mean, here on the weekly chart down here, you can see it's been really junky, and uranium's been quite stop-start in terms of is it going to be an energy source or not, and certainly in Australia it remains on the nose, but overseas and certainly in the US, the big tech companies are looking very closely at uranium and saying it's something that they need to access, all the power or to provide all the power that's going to be required for AI and all these other automation and robotics that are going to occur over the next few years. You can see, it's a pretty junky on the weekly base, but on the daily, there's your kind of breakout zone. It threatened to get out of there this week and then sold back to finish the week. But that's the thing. It's what we call a little bit of a V-shaped rally straight off the bottom. So there's 62%. Given a rally like that that's only 50 days, 62% in 50 days, you probably need some rest and some back and fill before, it could start, a trend into new all-time highs. So that's why we've got it on the watch list. It's not a key idea, but it's one that we're going to be watching very closely. So let's just have a quick look at the mandate of Atom, the ETF. So you can see that it offers. Just move my drawing tool. So you can see that it's not only about uranium mining. So that's probably why this one's run harder than say the other uranium ETFs that we have in Australia. But it's also looking at those that are also manufacturing equipment for uranium and nuclear industries. So if we have a look at their holdings, you'll see that they're not just uranium miners. So there's a uranium miner that's physical uranium, and then you start to have these energy producers. So that's a uranium miner. Not sure quite what those ones are, but certainly I recognise these as energy companies that do use uranium as an energy source or build those nuclear power plants. So that's really the differentiator and why this one's performed so well. So you can see still 55% uranium energy as a sector, but also as that industrials, utilities and other, which will be anyone dealing with components of uranium. So that's why this is probably a key one to watch. As I said, just going back to the chart, it's run too hard, 2V, so it needs to settle in, but that's why it's on our watch list. And certainly with that kind of performance straight off the bottom, and we know those requirements for energy over the next few years in the world, just in terms of AI, as I said, robotics, all this demand that we're going to have for energy, it's certainly a key space to watch. So we'll keep that one on the watch list. And the final item on our agenda today is, as I said, a ETF or a sector that looks like it's bottoming out after a long downtrend, and there is a way to play that in Australia with an ETF. So that is CLNE, and it's a global clean energy ETF. So you can see, let's have a look on I'll actually change this to a monthly chart and just show you how significantly bad it's been and in a significant downtrend. So just in terms of measurement, I think it was listed in March 2021, and it's down 53% over that time. So we know clean energy was all the rage, and since kind of faded away a little bit. But that just in terms of that's just been in a pure downtrend. I mean, that's exactly what you don't want to be invested in the ETF space. As I said, you want to identify things in bases, and then you want things that are in trend. You certainly don't want positions in a downtrend. So we'll just change that to the weekly chart. But why this has piqued my interest at the moment is you kind of see on the weekly chart that it is, it feels like it's starting to bottom out. So there's kind of that first indication that this is a bottoming base. It's had kind of one, two, three. This is kind of the third or fourth attempt to try and get through this point of resistance. And there you've got that would be the 50-day or 50-week moving average. It's slowly starting to pop above that. So that's why it's come up on the radars, just in terms of, as we're looking at all the ETFs, particularly the sector ETFs, and thematic ETFs. This certainly came up on the radar this week, so this is a kind of a bit of a special situation. I mean, in terms of bottoming names, they're often hard to play, but if it does start to move out of this range, I mean, it's down 50%. Energy we've seen with uranium is kind of a key, well, outside of oil, energy, new sources of energy, and as I said, uranium, which we just covered, seem to be, getting a bit of interest in the market at the moment. So there's a pretty kind of constructive bottoming base, and you can see, most people will have left this name by now just because it's just been so terrible over that period. But as I said, that's your base, and if it can start to move out of here, it might well start trending. And if that that theme gets going, I mean, it's anyone's guess how far this could move. So we'll just have a quick look at the mandate. So it's from from Van Eck. It's a global clean energy ETF. Only has about 57 million in assets at the moment. So clearly not one that people are watching closely. It kind of gives you an exposure to clean energy companies associated with clean energy production and the technology associated with that. So it's top kind of 30 largest global companies, and you can kind of see the other things I like to look at is just the country exposure. So it's actually got, it's only 33% in the US, and then it has quite a lot of Europe, and Europe's been quite strong. It's got a bit of China. New Zealand actually featuring quite well there. So yeah, if you tally all that up, it's got quite a lot of Europe, and Europe has been quite strong at the moment. So you got power producers, energy traders, electric utilities, equipment, semiconductors, and construction and engineering. So it's a really good kind of mix. So the next thing I want to look at, I'm just going to look at those top 10 stocks and just see what that tells us on the chart and see how they're faring. Because if we do have a lot of these, or a good proportion of these top 10 stocks looking really positive, looking like they're at least basing or starting to trend, then it's something that we want to keep our eye on really closely, because it'll give us an indication that the underlying stocks are certainly reflective of what's happening in this space, and if they can keep pushing, we may well start trending. And as I said, it's been so hammered, it's been a forgotten sector. It could do quite well, so certainly one to keep on the watch list. So let's have a quick look at those top 10 holdings. I'll start with Next Tracker. So this is, it's reported recently. I'll just change that to give you a better view. Kind of see on the weekly, there's kind of a big base on the weekly. It's popped out of here, reported recently, and that looks really quite constructive. So that's earnings received well, and then it's just settling back in. So we'll see if that can start to push in the weeks ahead. But yeah, that looks constructive. So that's the number one holding. Then we have Vestas Wind System. So you can kind of see reflective of the ETF just being hammered, but it does look like a base there as well. So there's your kind of base. Not quite set up to push yet, but reflective of what the ETF looks like. So that's interesting data. Here you've got EDP SA. So this is electric utilities in Portugal. So once again, reflective of the broader ETF being in a downtrend, but there's probably your base, and now it's looking to push out. So that's kind of like a year-to-date high, and if it's had earnings, it kind of responded well, and there's kind of a lot of green bars coming through. So yeah, that's interesting, positive. EDP, so this is related to that company, but in the utility space. So once again, look at that big downtrend, but there is another bottoming base. So really interesting, some green bars. You had earnings, crept up. So we'll see if that, like the ETF, it's probably a couple of weeks off, or a month or two off. But if this can start to push, that looks really constructive. Here we've got First Solar. So this is in the US. Once again, there was earnings. They've had a bit of a pop here, and then it's settled back in. But that's once again another bottoming base. Needs a bit more time. But there's your big downtrend on the weekly, but can that start to move out? It's certainly worth watching. Verbund, so this is to be in Germany, and utilities, electric utilities, so it's quite junky on the weekly chart all over the place. But that, there's definitely been some volume coming in. There's been earnings. It's responded well. Needs a bit more time. That's probably the base that it needs to get out of here. So certainly longer than the others, but bottoming base as well. Chubu Electric Power, so this is in Tokyo, electric utilities, and you can see, just zoom that out a bit, but there's your base. I'll draw that a bit better. There's the base, so it broke out with earnings and then it's come back and tested that. We've had some volume coming in, kind of lower volume selling, so we'll see once again a week or two or a couple months. This will tell us, if it can get moving. Here we've got B, so this is Brookfield Renewable Corporation, and this is listed in the US. Once again, another bottoming base. That actually looks quite constructive. There's earnings. And you can see how it's kind of tightened up. And if that can get going, obviously there's points of resistance along the way, but on the weekly it's quite junky, but on the daily that looks really constructive, just like the ETF. So once again, the underlying stocks are kind of showing exactly what the ETF, all reflective of the ETF chart. And here we have, this is Contact Energy in New Zealand. Probably, it's a difficult trader, but once again, there's your bottoming kind of setup. There's that previous high. So ideally, there's more work to do to get up through there, but as I said, couple of months that could well be looking a lot better and through into a trend as well. Here's Ørsted. This is in Denmark. Electric utility, so this is probably not one of the better ones. A lot more work to do, still a lot of selling. Earnings probably not responded well, and big downtrend, so that's probably one of the worst out of the top 10. Here we've got Ormat Technologies. So this is once again another electric utility listed in the US. But there's another kind of bottoming base. It threatened to go there on earnings, had a dividend, settled back in, and there will be another point of previous resistance. But it's kind of getting a lot more constructive and kind of tightening up, and that's kind of the pattern that is known as a volatility contraction pattern. That comes from Mark Minervini, a really top trader, self-made multi-millionaire trader. But that's one thing that he talks about, volatility contraction. That's exactly what we can see here. So as I said, we'll see how that operates or how that reacts over the next few weeks, and if it can get through this point as well in the coming months, I mean, that could really start another trend. So, and here's Clearway Energy. This is really interesting because this is alternative power generation, and it's basically at new all-time highs. So once again, this was probably the tariff sell-off, and you've had that volatility since then. But there's another day of volatility, but it's tightened up, and it wants to go into new all-time highs. So that's a pretty constructive base, and certainly worth having on the watch list. That's still got a volatility contraction. You can kind of see there's more green bars in general, so more buying coming into the name and at new all-time highs. So once again, that's really interesting. So once again, I think CLNE needs to be on your watch list. And those top 10, just a quick review of those top 10 holdings, it was really quite constructive. So all reflective of this bottoming base. So we'll see, can this, one of the worst performing ETFs of the last few years, start trending? That's the question, but certainly something keeping an eye